Welcome to Chit Chatter with Ria, the podcast that provides information to you about the legal and political process. Now here's your host, Ria Chattergoon.
Welcome back to Chit Chatter. Today we're going to chit chat about gun reform. It's a controversial topic when it really shouldn't be. From the outset, let me say I am not against responsible gun ownership or possession. I myself have a concealed weapons license, and I'm always advocating for women especially to obtain their own license and receive appropriate weapons training. The fact is, most responsible gun owners, at least the ones I know, have no issue with individuals taking responsible steps to gun ownership. Regardless of whichever political aisle you're on, I think that is the norm, again, for responsible gun owners. We all want our kids to be safe when they're in school. We all want to go to our places of worship, grocery stores, movie theaters, malls, without being scared, right? I'll say since the Buffalo shooting, I am so hesitant to take my son to the grocery store for fear of what wacko could show up and just start shooting innocent people. When I visit his school, I look at all the entry points where someone could get in. I was there just this past Monday, and it's one of the first things I was looking at. I find that I live, and maybe you don't, but I live in such a constant fear. It's sort of in the back of my head, which I hate, right? And I always say we need to do something. We need some sort of gun reform in this country. As of the date of this recording, there have been about 582 mass shootings. That's just mass shootings. That's not shootings from, on individual people. There have been 32 mass murders, and over 1,400 children in the United States have been killed by a gun by November of 2022. In fact, it's said that firearms are the number one cause of death for children in the United States, surpassing auto accidents and other injuries. If that's not shocking to you, I don't know what else to say. The U.S. surpasses any other country in the world with regard to gun violence. And don't say, well, what can we do because guns are being, given to people, they can get it illegally, et cetera, et cetera. Why is this not happening in any other country? We've really got to think about that. And so, as always, I like to talk to you about case law, and so that you understand some of the case law that's happening right now. In June, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down a decision in the case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. And what it did was overturned New York's gun safety law. The court ruled that New York's law requiring a license to carry concealed weapons in public places was unconstitutional. It said it was unconstitutional, and it extended the right to own a gun for self-defense, which already existed in the home, to exist outside of the home as well. And Bruen, that case Bruen, is the first major Second Amendment decision from the Supreme Court since another case by the name of District of Columbia versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago, which gave the right to receive a handgun for self-defense in the home. So in Heller, the Supreme Court specified that some gun regulations were permissible, including bans on weapons in what the court termed were permissible, but which also included a ban on weapons in what the court termed sensitive places like schools and churches. And so in the Bruen decision, the court affirmed, that means it agreed with, the Heller's doctrine of sensitive places and specified that polling places fit into that category. It also said that legislative bodies and courthouses were included in those sensitive places. What it did not do was define sensitive places or address other places of mass congregation, such as protests or public transportation. we're probably going to have some future lawsuits to determine where these prohibitions and these historically regulated sensitive spaces are, and to determine, whether these gun laws are constitutional. So there's a lot that's going to come down from this Bruen decision. Notably, the overturned law didn't exist in isolation, the New York law. It was similar to laws in 7 other states, which the combined population of those states account for over a quarter of the people in the United States. And so the Bruen decision threatens those laws. Florida, to give you an example, is not threatened by that decision. And that's because Florida currently bans open carry, which would allow individuals to carry firearms in a manner where it's visible to others, right? Florida has some of the most relaxed gun laws in the United States. It's going to be interesting on how it affects current Florida law. So right now, if you are in Florida, the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services grants licenses for concealed carry. That means you have to have a license if you want the ability to carry a gun that is hidden from view. You have to meet certain requirements in order to receive that concealed weapon. So, for example, you may not get a license if you have a felony, if you're a convicted felony, and you have to be a United States citizen. Okay, so for everyone saying that Florida is somehow giving licenses to illegal aliens or people who are not citizens of the United States, or that's just not true. And Florida does have some gun restrictions, right? So a person cannot have a firearm if they have an injunction for domestic violence. It's unlawful for dealers to sell firearms to minors. You have to be 21 in the state of Florida. Prospective gun owners have to be a Florida resident. The state has a various regulations and requirements. Background checks are required. There's a waiting period of 3 days between the purchase and delivery of a firearm. Now, there is no limit on the number of firearms a person can purchase in one transaction, which is why we see some of these Floridians with 10 and 20 guns, and I'm not really sure why you need that many guns unless you're hunting. I mean, I come from a family of hunters. I understand that, but do you really need to possess that many guns? Unless you're trying to make up for other areas of your life. I won't be vulgar, I promise. In March of this year, Congressman Anthony Sabatini of Florida. Sabatini is a mega MAGA politician. He's an attorney. I'll just give you an example. Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia campaigned from him. He is one of the people who wants to defund the FBI. He comes up with all of these conspiracy theories. How anyone can vote for him is beyond me. But in March of this year, he introduced House Bill 103 to carry firearms without licenses. He was following the Texas law that was passed this year. And thankfully, that bill died in committee in March. But I suspect that if we continue to elect these ridiculous politicians, these types of bills are coming down the pipeline. As I'm recording this, it was the sentencing for Nicholas Cruz. If you don't know who that is, he is the shooter who entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 2018 and massacred 17 people. He had AR-15. A jury sentenced him to life in prison, and the sentencing hearing was held this week. It was very, very difficult to listen to those families talk to him and about their struggles with losing their loved ones. Cruz had a troubled past. It included animal cruelty, There were 19 incidents of knife or firearm possessions. And I want to say he was 19 years old at the time of the shooting. But there were a lot of instances where things should have been reported, and there's no way that he should have ever been able to possess a gun. But he had made statements of hatred towards Jewish people, towards African Americans. He had made statements of desire to hurt people, and specifically made statements about shooting up a school, and nothing was done. People who reported it were ignored. I mean, there's just a whole list of what went wrong here. And, he was able to enter this school, and these beautiful, beautiful people, including children, were murdered that day. It was very difficult to watch the sentencing hearing. I actually couldn't watch the entire thing. Today's guest is Jeff Foster. Jeff is the husband of my college friend, Lauren. They have two beautiful girls, Lily and Lou, and Jeff is an AP government teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. He was present on the day of the massacre. Following the massacre, he was intimately involved in assisting his students in planning their march and their various gun reform activism that has occurred since then. He wrote a book that was published in 2020 called For Which We Stand. I personally bought copies of the book for all of my kiddies, my friends, my family who are in the age group, but I actually bought one for my son Liam as well. The book is really great for any age, and frankly, there are some adults who may benefit from it. It provides a step-by-step explanation of how our government works and why it matters. It's filled with great illustrations, which my son Liam loves, and it keeps him engaged. Not sure how much he's learning just yet, but we're just going to start the process, right? The foreword for the book is written by Yolanda Renee King. That's Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King's granddaughter. It's really, really a great book. And I will post the links on where you can purchase it. Today's episode is dedicated to those beautiful souls who lost their lives in 2018. This happened in our backyard, so it is a little emotional sometimes to think about it. Those families are never going to be the same. We are never going to be the same. But let's not give just our thoughts and prayers. I keep saying on my personal social media page, honor these victims. Vote appropriately. Right now, we're voting for leaders who need to make the right choices for us and for our families. We need people who aren't paid for their vote, like organizations like the NRA, aka Marco Rubio, who's accepted more than $3 million from the NRA and won't do a damn thing to protect us. I mean, guy doesn't even show up to work, so I don't know what more to say about that. We have so much power here if we just show up. Show up and vote. Vote for your kids, because you're not going to be here forever. You vote for a legacy that you can leave to them. I hope you enjoy this interview with Jeff. And as always, please share with your family and friends. Welcome to the show, Jeff Foster. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast. I know before we started recording, I was telling you that I am friends with your wife, Lauren. We actually graduated from the Department of Visual Arts and Dance at Florida State University. And I gave up my dance career and went into being a lawyer. And Lauren's kept on going.
She's still dancing. Yeah, I always joke with my friends that she would have been like maybe on Broadway if she didn't meet me. But
she probably would have.
Hopefully, she thinks she got the better deal.
Well, you're a fellow Seminole too, right?
Yes, I am. Yep, a couple years before you guys. Yes.
All right. Good. Well, listen, I have been wanting to talk to you for a while. Actually, I was telling you before we started recording, Lauren was one of the people who encouraged me to start this podcast. And it really came about, just being in a rage about Trump being elected. And everything that has happened since then. Of course, the shooting at Parkland and our government's inability or failure, intentional failure to do anything about gun safety in this country. And I know you wrote this book, For Which We Stand. You released it, was it 2020?
September of 2020. Yeah.
Okay. I actually bought I bought it on Amazon. I'm sorry. I know, like, small businesses
cool.
get dinged on Amazon. But I ended up buying a number of these books for all of my nieces and nephew who were sort of in the age range. And I actually bought a couple for friends as gifts when they got their citizenship.
Very cool.
But I love this book. I've actually started reading bits and parts of it with my 7-year-old. He loves the illustrations, by the way. He thinks that's a great.
Yeah, Julie did a great job with that. I mean, I had a hand in kind of saying what I wanted it to look like, but she definitely had some artistic license, and she 1,000 times better job than I could have ever done in any of the drawings. So.
No, it's great. It's great. But before we get into the book, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you are an educator, you're a father, you're now a writer, but tell me a little bit about yourself. When did you start teaching? Why did you start teaching? How did that come about?
I went to Florida State, like we said before, graduated in '93 with a marketing and finance degree, actually, and then toiled in that business probably for about 5 or 6 years and really didn't love the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, suit and tie, kind of felt dirty some days. I was in advertising, I was in sales, and, if you don't believe in the product, it's kind of hard to, and your salary is based on commission. Obviously, not that I did anything bad. I didn't feel great about the job. So I stopped doing that and said, it's time for a career change. And I was bartending on the side at the time. And there was a thought of maybe becoming, a manager of a bar. I was offered a position at the, what was the name of the place that Schwarzenegger and Stallone started in New York? I remember that big, whatever. Long story. They wanted to open one in South Korea. And I was approached about maybe going to South Korea with one of my fellow bartenders and almost did it, but decided not to. And my mother was a teacher. So she was like, since you just work at nights at this bar and you're kind of figuring things out, why don't you come substitute at the school? And at least it'll give you something to do during the day. You won't, not that I was ever a big, sleeper in or anything like that, but it's just like, you'll be up anyways. You might as well make a few dollars, see if you maybe like that. And I took to it immediately. I love the kids. I started coaching sports, really enjoyed the camaraderie, just got into the flow pretty quickly and went back and got my master's. I took master's classes at Barry University, enough to be certified in teaching. And I was actually had a chance to be certified in math or social studies, because math due to my finance and marketing degree, and social studies because a lot of the classes I took on the side of Florida State were social studies classes. And my first job at Coral Springs High School was a geometry teacher for a semester. I was subbing in for someone that was pregnant. And then ironically, I got hired at Stoneman High School for another woman that was pregnant. So obviously there was something in the water in that area at the time. And I got a social studies job there, was hired full-time the following year, taught geography for 1 year, and then was afforded the opportunity to teach AP government, advanced placement government and politics. And I've been doing that since, it's funny to say, the turn of the century. So, And I mean, it started early. I mean, obviously teaching about government and politics, things are real time happening. And 9/11 was that first year I was teaching the class. Like literally my first semester, 9/11 occurs. So, I mean, it's like, so here I am teaching these really, sharp kids about how things work. And as my book says, why it matters. And there's when 9/11 occurs, they come on the intercom and say, don't turn your TVs off. Don't show the kids this.
Right.
And I'm like, no way. I'm like,
they've got to see it.
This is living, it's happening in real time. We're going to discuss it. We're going to talk about it. So, most of the kids did go home that day, but I mean, it felt like for the next month and a half, kids would come to my class during lunchtime and we would watch CNN or Fox, whatever we could get into our school that day, and literally watch, us attack Afghanistan or Iraq, or watch the press conferences live. And it was just really, it's sort of insane that you could watch history happening in front of you, but obviously it's different now than it was, during the first World Wars or in Vietnam. And since then, just all the tumult that's happened in this country, from the different elections to that same year was the Bush-Gore election, with the hanging chads and everything. And since then, just a lot has happened. And unfortunately, unfortunately for that one day at Stoneman Douglas in 2018, I was there when the mass shooting happened. And that's what kind of I guess, catapulted me to the forefront of a lot of people's minds, because most of my students that, led the March on Washington, I was sort of their mentor. And, and we obviously went to Tallahassee, changed some laws, went to Washington, D.C., met with people, tried to change laws. They're still trying to change laws. But unfortunately, as we talked before, these mass shootings keep happening. And there was another school shooting yesterday in the St. Louis area. And I actually reached out to the AP government teacher there today. And it's kind of sad that, that's sort of become like the norm. We went through it at our school, and we understand how the kids are going to react. I mean, everybody's not the same, but we know, the stages, will say, that occur afterwards. So there's a group of us at the school that are still there that always reach out to the teachers from their identical positions at the other school and say, like, hey, I've been there. I know how this is going to go. Things are going to happen that you don't expect. If you reach out, here's my cell phone number. Call me whenever. And I've spoken to a couple of them. Some have politely said thank you so much and declined. Others have reached out. Others have reached out immediately. So it's a sad fraternity to be a part of. Obviously,
it's part of the club you don't want to belong to.
But anything you can do to help others that that are originally going into this blind and not knowing how the community is going to act, how the school is going to react, how their students are going to react, and really even how they're going to react. I mean, my wife tells me all the time, like that first year, she didn't know where I was every day when I woke up, because my mind was always sort of darting in different places. And I think one of the best things that happened for a lot of us in our community, including myself, was being involved with that march, because it kept our brains occupied and kind of kept us off the grief and pushed us more towards action. And I think after that was all over, I think literally the day I got home from the march, I think it was the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, I shut down and I got strep throat and I was out for like a week. So the whole body just like said, boom, enough.
So for those who don't know about the march, I mean, obviously everyone, I would hope everyone has knowledge of, this horrific massacre that occurred right in our backyard. I mean, I'm in Hollywood, and I mean, I just remember being floored for 2 days, just didn't know how to even function, that this just happened. And because I have a lot of friends who live in Parkland, their kids are there. Tell me what the process was with the kids, with your students after the massacre. How did the march come about? What were sort of the organizational steps you all took to get there?
I would say the majority, the kids, it was very organic. I mean, we have a lot of great kids, and obviously those kids are well known in a lot of circles now. And it started, I believe it happened, God, I should know the exact day it happened on. I think it was a Wednesday it happened on. And that Saturday, I was actually working that Saturday, even though our school was closed. I teach driver's education through the county, through the school board on the weekends. So I was working on a Saturday, my phone started blowing up, and they're like, Emma and David and Delaney, these are names, Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, Delaney Tarr. They were at the county, Fort Lauderdale County, or Broward County, excuse me, with other leaders of the county, and they were giving speeches about how this has to stop, and that they had kind of just taken upon themselves to start it. And Emma went out and said, she had like my notes in her hand and said, these notes have taught us what to do, and we know how to organize, and we're gonna plan this. And obviously they had grandiose plans. And initially, when I heard about it, I'm like, this is amazing. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, God, this is a hell of an undertaking. I don't know if this is going to occur. And magically, it was a month and 10 days, and we had almost 1 million people around the country, and hundreds of thousands in Washington, D.C., and to be there that day, and just to, every step of the way, the kids, again, most of it they had done. They had great parents. They had excellent teachers, not just myself. And whenever they needed advice, they came to the people, the adults in their lives, but a lot of times they did it on their own. Speaking on my personal side of it, Emma and myself, I had them all in my class that year, and they would come to my class for like sort of refuge that year, like because when we went back, I guess, to speak to what happened, after, at our school, we weren't learning for about a month and a half. It was all about healing. So,
of course,
we had counselors all over the school. We had games we were playing. Literally there were coloring, whatever the kids wanted to do. Some groups wanted to talk about the day and where they were and where you were, and you had to tread lightly, obviously, but I'm no expert in that, but there was, so what happened was, with Emma in my class, we would organize things after school, and every day for about 2 weeks in different areas of the city, we would meet at, whether it was a hotel across the street or whether it was the park, which sort of became the gathering place afterwards. We would meet with families and kids and tell them how they could get to Washington, D.C. to participate in the march. And essentially all these groups reached out, airlines and buses, and just donations were coming from everywhere. I mean, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And we were able to get every child from Douglas that wanted to go to Washington, D.C. a free trip to Washington, D.C. So, I mean, we had trips that included 3 or 4 days in D.C. with, tours and meetings with congressmen and senators. We had the 1-day back and forth trip on a plane. We had the 2-day back and forth trip on a bus. And, I would say we probably between 700 and 1,000 people, myself,
Wow.
Emma, and then our alumni obviously became really strong there as well. And my good friend, Craig Pugatch, who's an attorney actually in Fort Lauderdale, he was the lead alumni guy on the side of it. And the three of us, organized us, got it all together. And then, like I said, next thing you know, it was the week of and we were there and it happened and everything was spectacular and went well. And then we were at home and everybody just, collapsed for a day. But that being said, they haven't stopped. They went on a bus tour that summer and it turned to, let's get everybody out to vote.
Yeah.
So it went from, let's talk to the politicians. All right, they're not going to do what we want them to do. So let's vote those people out and get people in there that will do what we want to do. And that's, that's what we stress every day in school, that, my mantra has always been, well before this happened, you can't complain if you don't participate.
Correct.
So,
correct. Listen, those kids are so, especially Emma and David, I've followed them. I've seen just their growth and their commitment to it. They're just such amazing kids. I guess I could say still kids, even though they're adults now, but
right.
It's just, I wish more young people would take on sort of that philosophy of let's get people out to vote. Because, one of the things that I always look at are the stats after each election, and you look at the age groups who are voting, and every year we talk about getting young people out to vote, but it doesn't seem like that core group of 18 to 25 is really voting in the numbers that we would like to see, right? So
definitely not.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by these kids that they're out there trying their best to get the word out.
I think they've activated more than they have in the past, but again, the numbers still, they're not close to where they should be. I mean, they have the excuse of a lot of them are transient, a lot of them are in college, but still, it should be an excuse. I mean, it's incumbent on us as social studies educators, it's incumbent on their parents and the adults in their life to say, you need to be registered. And, I've got these apps on my phone that I talk to them on, even after they graduate. Right. And I say, like, guys, remember, if you're not registered by, in Florida, you're going to be 30 days out in order to be able to vote.
Right.
So you register. And this Thursday, I'm taking my seniors this year who are 18 for the first time to vote over to the park that I mentioned before to vote for the first time. So early voting. So, there's all sorts of things that have been put in since we've been alive for sure that have tried to increase voter turnout. My wife and I mailed in our ballots early this year.
Right.
I usually vote early every year. So there's really no excuse anymore. I mean, it's the easiest thing to do as a citizen.
It's a message I've been trying to just talk about on my social media. I like voting on election day, but I'm not in a very busy area. I can walk in and vote, in 10 minutes. But it's so easy to vote. And so we talk about voter suppression and, everything they're doing to suppress the vote. I think last week we had that release of that video of arresting people with felonies who went out and voted. I mean, it's just so disgusting. But, there are all these attempts to suppress the vote. But I always tell people, but look at all the ways you can vote, right? Look at all you've got early voting, you've got mail-in ballots, you can vote the day of. I mean, what else do we need to do to make this easier for you?
That's it. I mean, when I teach the lesson, it used to be, single day voting was a problem. If it rains that day, it's a problem. I got to work. Well, all that's been taken care of with this. I mean, you can vote on Saturday and Sunday now early if you want.
Right.
So, and the vast majority of states have accepted that. It does look like right now that the numbers are extremely high early voting so far. So that's great. But again, we'll have to wait till afterwards to see, actually the demographic results of if it did trickle down to the younger generation. Because the numbers, the scary thing about the numbers that I saw this morning when I was watching is that 80% of each party thinks the other party is going to ruin the country, and that's tough. You know, I mean, that's how. I mean, I understand polarization has gone to the nth degree with the internet and everything else, all the false information, and that's a big problem we have to deal with. But it's scary when literally 4/5 of the country on both sides think that the other party will destroy the country if they take over. That's not healthy.
Yeah, it really isn't. It really isn't. I always say that there is no midpoint anymore. We're just on opposite sides, like you said. What's sort of the sense you get from the kids in your class? Mostly your seniors who are going to graduate and become voting citizens. What are their feelings on where politics are, right now?
It's obviously I have, the college bound best kids
Right.
in the school, I have 200 AP students, but I do teach one honors class this year. And I have a study hall as well that is not AP.
Mhm.
They're, I guess I hate to say this out loud. Unfortunately, they're like every other kid that's grown up before. They're so concerned about college right now. They're so
Right.
concerned. So they still. I mean, again, I have a lot. They're going to vote for the first time this week, and again, I try to talk to them and explain how important it is. And with most young people, it's especially with all the distractions they have these days. They'll give me the lip service. I just hope that they show up and
Right.
become
And do it.
active citizens. I just say
Yeah.
the minimum you can be is again a voter, but it doesn't take that much to hold a sign, to put a bumper sticker on your car, to march if there's something that you're against in your
Right.
community, to show up to an event. I mean, there's and even it's great to see organizations. Again, I'm watching a football game last night, and the NFL is running commercials about voting. It's fabulous. So I mean,
Right.
there's no question that collectively we become a lot more aware that the election is coming up, especially midterms. I mean, midterms used to be a blip on the radar. Now midterms are as big as general elections. So that's awesome. Now I'm still concerned about the local elections, which might have more impact on you and I than anything else.
Right.
And you get like a 12% turnout.
Right.
But
Right.
but at least midterms they're talking 50, 60% now, where in general presidential elections they're 65, 70%, which is awesome. But again, it should be closer to 100%. I know we have a lot of elections. I know we're busy. We have a lot going on. But again, as we said before, it doesn't take that much time or effort to get out and vote.
It's a conscious decision.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, the Nicholas Cruz decision came down about a week and a half ago. Obviously people are on polar opposite sides of what shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the decision?
It was tough. We were in school and we knew it was coming. We knew that they'd wrapped up their case. We knew the jury was in deliberation. So it was weird. We thought it was going to be, when I say we, my friends at the school who were obviously there that day as well. And we actually got a text from our principal saying, the jury just came back. They're going to have a decision in an hour. So obviously, the people that I was with, and I was, some of my good friends were in the rooms that kids were killed in, that they were, I lost, a couple of friends and a student that day as well. So, this was, I didn't think, the reaction was going to be so visceral. I didn't think we were going to be so affected by it. But when he first said that he was guilty, however many months ago that was, and that was televised live. It was televised. I think it was a planning day we were on. It was televised live, and we were all in the room just watching this speechless when he was speaking, and he tried to apologize to the families. And I mean, we were all just bawling, uncontrollably. Yeah. It was weird that not that it's ever going to go away, but I didn't know I would react that way into a person that day of the let's say the 15 people I was hanging out with when the decision came down. When we first heard it was happening, we almost got sick to our stomach. We're all like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. I mean, that's how we felt. And then obviously as they were reading, the judge was reading the verdict or the decision. I was kind of the first one to realize at the end, like, holy shit, it's life.
Yeah.
And because, she read that, the 15 different things for the one person.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not the right answer. I'm like, hold on a second. So we all I kind of did one of the shush, and we all kind of sat and listened to the second one. I'm like, this is the big question here. And they're like, no. I'm like, oh my God, and even the press, because we were watching the local news, we were watching, I think it was CNN on two different TVs in the room, one computer and one big screen TV. And they might have known, but they were afraid to put on their bottom line, life, because I think they were trying to synthesize what was going on. Right. And we kept sitting there and, next person. And when we got to finally the 14th or 15th person, I'm like, guys, and then they finally posted it looks like life. And, I don't think anybody enjoys eye for an eye, killing somebody, whatever else. But if the death penalty was ever made for one person,
it was this
was the situation. So, again, you hate to say that kid deserves to die or whatever else, but ultimately everybody was fairly disappointed that I was in the room with. I know the families that I'm close with, a lot of the families where the kids, were murdered and my colleagues were murdered. I would say almost to a person, they want the death penalty. And I'm sure if you saw the post interviews, they all said, I hope he gets shivved in jail, basically, which was pretty crazy to see in a press conference. But everybody.
But how else are you supposed to feel?
And we were all like, wow. But at the same time, I'd say the same thing if they killed my child. So,
right.
But yeah,
Right.
I think there's one more sentencing because they want to plead, I guess, their case on November 1st, which is next Tuesday, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's as far as I know, I mean, legally the judge can't change the decision. So I mean,
No.
I understand that the parents want to one more time like plead, but it's almost like, God, I wish the judge would have just denied the motion and said it's over, he's gone. Because I mean, to put them through it one more time, and that was probably the hardest part for all of us, is to watch our friends like Fred Gutenberg and Vicky and Patricia Oliver, like when they realized their faces that holy shit, this just happened, because it took them a few minutes to realize it as well. So it was a very difficult day, and it's and it'll be difficult again when we see them again in 5 days or whatever it is. So, but yeah, no one was. I think there was one brother of one of the victims of a girl actually who I had in class who was okay with life, but everybody else I think was very disappointed in the jury's decision.
Right. I mean, the one thing I say from a legal perspective is, it sort of cuts off his appeal, right? If there were to be any, and save the families just further trauma and grief.
Sure.
I mean, that's the only positive I can think of the decision. But again, you guys are members of a club that nobody ever wanted to be a part of, and it's just horrific. It's horrific. I want to ask you so tell me about the book. What was the catalyst for writing the book? Why did you write it? Who's it intended for?
I always wanted to write a book. I didn't know I was going to write a book on government.
Right.
I've always enjoyed writing. When I was in college, when I was in my master's class, I just enjoyed writing. I've saved some of my papers over the years. I'm like, I always thought I would write a book. And then when this event happened at our school, I would say I met a lot of people in DC and Tallahassee, a lot of people a lot of powerful people will say. And I was actually on vacation in the summer of 19, and I got a call from a friend. It was actually Emma's first agent, who's no longer, she's an agent, but she's no longer Emma's agent. And she's like, Jeff, I was having dinner with a friend from Scholastic the other day, and they really want to write a book a kid's book on government. And I thought of you, would you be interested? And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, whatever. And so to kind of make a long story fairly short, within the next 2 days, I had a conference call with a bunch of people from Scholastic, and they asked me questions. I answered them correctly. I presented a quick rough draft. I wrote a chapter for them in a few days, and they were ecstatic with it. And we decided to move forward with the book. It's geared. It really, since you have a copy, I mean, it anywhere from young children to adults could read it. And I have many of my adult friends that I took it to the beach. I'm learning so much, but it's geared towards anywhere from, I'd say, middle elementary to probably low high school. I think Scholastic sort of does like a 5 through 8 because you have to categorize your book in terms of grade, 5th grade through 8th grade. But the reviews on Amazon, which I can say mostly are awesome, which is great. They all are like, it's a 75-year-old woman the other day posted it and said, I really wanted this book. This book is great. I'm so happy to be reacquainted with government and how things work and blah, 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 blah. But the funny thing part about the few reviews that we'll say are not so happy with me is one person will say like, oh, it's not such a conservative viewpoint. The other person, it's such a liberal viewpoint. I'm like, what? There's absolutely zero viewpoint.
Zero viewpoint, right?
And that was the goal. Well, a couple of people on the conservative right think that, I push like gay marriage or don't talk about the abortion issue, but there's a reason for not pushing the abortion issue. It's supposed to be for kids. So I don't really want to talk about abortion as a landmark decision. So could I have put in there maybe on my back, right, a big timeline of all the marches throughout history? Could I put, the March for Life with, for the pro-abortion people anti-abortion people? I probably could have. I mean, that was an oversight. So maybe if I could go back, I'd put that in there just to assuage them. Because it really wasn't like, let's put in this liberal march and don't put any conservative marches in there or whatever else. But I mean, it turned out great. It was a labor of love. I mean, I really enjoyed, every spare moment I had. The funny thing was when I finally signed the contract, I think it was August, and they wanted it by Thanksgiving of that same year. And I'm like, I'm a full-time teacher.
Right.
And so, but I managed to bang out, a chapter or two and send it off to the editors in New York, and then they would send it back, and then ultimately, the fact checkers, and we had it done by Thanksgiving, and I got my first copy, not completely illustrated. I want to say like in January, and the coolest day ever was I got the finished book for the first time in the mail the same day that we moved into our new house that I'm sitting in right now.
Oh, wow.
So we literally signed the papers, got home, and there was books on
There was
when I
books
got
on
home.
your...
Yeah, I'm like, that is so cool. So
That is cool.
it was like the perfect day. So, but yeah, it came out, when you're just writing a Word document for months with no illustrations, and you see it in full color, it was like, wow. I mean, I was showing all my, like, look how cool this looks, I mean, it was really cool. So
now you got Yolanda Renee King, who is Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter, to do the foreword here. How did that come about?
She was there at the march. She was part of the march. She spoke with Jacqueline Corn, who was our senior class president the following year. She was a junior that year, and she was on stage and said a few things. And she's been close with those kids for a while. And I know a lot of people in that circle. Like my friend Jonah Breyer is one of the representatives for the family. And we reached out to them, and they gladly accepted. And it's a really cool thing. I mean, to be able to tell my daughters that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jr., I mean, even my students are like, "Who is this?" I'm like, "That is Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter."
Right. Well, I will tell you, my 7-year-old was very impressed by that, and because he was just learning about Martin Luther King Jr. And so I started, showing him the book, and I showed him her picture in the foreword and reread it. And he was like, "Well, that's really cool." So, but what I love about the book, Jeff, is that I don't think it has an age limit, right? I think it lays things out so clearly to people who, may not have thought about government or elections or anything since we learned it in the 7th, 8th grade, whenever we had our civics government class. At least that's when I had it. I remember having a government class in high school. And actually, I believe I registered to vote then through that teacher. But what I do like about the book is how it lays everything out step by step by step. And I think the regular lay person who's not thinking about this daily, I mean, you and I are, I'm an attorney, so I'm dealing with this, with the law every day. You're a AP government teacher, you're teaching this every day. So it's sort of second nature for us.
Sure.
But for the regular person who's just watching the news and maybe watching some one-sided view, because like we talked about, everything is, far left or far right at this point, they're just really not having an understanding of how government works. And so what I love about the book is that it really shows you and tells you how things are done.
Right. And if you see something or hear something, you can just turn to that chapter and be like, oh, okay, that's why that happened. And that's sort of the goal of the book. Yeah, you can bounce around where you want. It's laid out in a particular way. But again, if you just want to learn about the judicial branch and how the Supreme Court works or how the judges are nominated and accepted, it's right there. You want to think about impeachment, there it is. You want to,
there it is.
So that's what's, and again, I love the way Scholastic uses the color coding for each chapter.
Yes.
You open the book, it makes things very easy to find. So
it does.
So I'm tickled to death that it came out the way it is. And we're trying to figure out what the next project is, but I feel like I was
just going to ask you, what's the next project?
It's hard. I mean, my agent just said it the other day. She's like, when are we going to go to another one? I'm like, I kind of poured out everything I know about government in that book. But I mean, we obviously could do certain things. I was going to write a real children's book during COVID. But it was a really great idea, but I just thought that I didn't want to celebrate COVID because of what had happened. It was without going in the weeds, it was about a dog who was happy that you were home because of COVID. And he's like, this is great. My family's here all the whole time. But again, because of the tragedy associated with COVID, I didn't want to create a book but they were really excited about the idea. I'm like, yeah, I just don't know if I want to do this because it felt a little weird, but we're working on it. I mean, Lauren's got ideas, my wife, every day about, she wants me to write a book on something about, very how to talk to kids about government because of the chaos of, like you said, no matter what channel you turn on, it's going to be slanted one way or the other. How can you get through those weeds to get to the correct answer? But again, we're maybe Christmas break, maybe the holiday break, maybe this summer I'll actually sit down and try to work on ideas, or maybe after I run this conversation with you today, I'll get out work on some ideas. But
so because you're a writer and because you're a teacher, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, these banning of books that's happening throughout the state.
It's hard. I mean, it's difficult. It's unbelievable that it's happening in 2022. It's very difficult to teach, and I find myself. I wanted to mention this before, actually. I knew we'd get to it at some point. This topic. I thought, I teach. I'm a fun guy. I try to present both sides. I try to ridicule everybody, And, because kids engage and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like if I say something, say derogatory about the current administration, I better make sure I say something about the Trump administration in the same sentence. If I say something complimentary about Biden, if I say something complimentary about Bush, I mean, it's wild that, I mean, I think I have a good enough rapport, luckily, and I think my kids are sharp enough,
Right.
that they're not going to like report me to the thought police. But it's scary. And I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm very comfortable with my job. I'm obviously respected in my community, and I know a lot of the people in my principal, my department head, they all support me. But I can't imagine being a teacher, who doesn't have that situation, that is so afraid to do something maybe innovative or do something that they think could really enhance the lesson because they're afraid that they're going to possibly lose their job or be sued for what they're saying. And it's crazy. And then even to the point where, the governor, and again, I'm not here to bash the governor, but I mean, to say that, again, I got that he loves veterans, but to say that any veteran who served can just become a teacher, it's like, really, man?
Right.
How denigrating that is to us as professionals. But then, of course, he ties it to his ideology and says, oh, because most of these teachers are just liberals anyways, and blah, blah. Well, that's not.
Yeah, you're indoctrinating children. Yeah.
That's not the case. That
Right.
isn't the case, so it's difficult. I mean, and I wish, parents, should the community have a say in what is being done within schools, for sure, but they shouldn't be, stirred up by the government to put pressure on educators to teach the way that the governor or the senator or the congressman or the city commissioner wants you to teach. And that's sort of what's going on, I think.
Yeah, but
without from the outside.
Without any real life examples, though, right?
Correct.
Because I grew up in Florida. I went to school here. I don't remember ever being indoctrinated by any book. And I mean, I was in honors and AP classes. We read certain books that, the rest of the school weren't reading. And I never felt that way. I mean, maybe I was indoctrinated. Maybe that's why I have all these different views. Maybe, but I don't see my issue with it is I don't see any real life examples of this happening. And I think, one, we're losing teachers in this state and on a rapid
by the
basis.
Thousands. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's scary. Thankfully, my son's at a school where it hasn't really been affected, but I have friends whose schools are just understaffed at this point. So, what are we going to do at that point? What's your sense of how teachers are feeling, handling? I mean, I know you're in a different community, but
yeah, I mean, everybody's frustrated. I mean, just because, again, I mean, we're not sure what our job description is anymore. Some people, and that's a scary thing. You're talking about veterans who've been around a long time. And again, I don't know every teacher that works in every community, but I think the majority of us are there for the right reasons. We're there to educate children, we're there to nurture children, we're there to, help raise your child, basically. Right. And last time I checked, I'm a good person, you're a good person because you came from good families and you made right decisions and you were given the tools by the people that raised you to make those proper decisions. So even if you're in my class and I'm a crazy person, you should not necessarily challenge it, but you should raise your hand, like, Mr. Foster, I don't think that's correct. I think you're being whatever. And you're like, oh, okay. And now, again, could there be, a handful of teachers that are defiant and adamant against that? Yes. But most educators are just there to teach the material in an unbiased manner to try to, again, and half of our job now, more than half of our job, it's always been this way, but it feels like more than ever now, there's so many emotional issues with kids these days. And that, that's new in the last 15 years. Mental health is as it should be, is taking the forefront, and that has changed the way we have to teach. And I mean, I would say even at a great school like ours, now granted, obviously went through a serious thing a few years ago, but these kids here now, we're not directly involved with that anymore. I'm still taking kids down to the wellness center, a couple times a semester, different kids, because they just can't handle what's going on. So I mean, and I'm trained in it, but I'm not a professional, obviously.
Right.
But I know what to say, and I know how to get in touch with the parent and figure out what's wrong and whatever else. And they're always real thankful. But again, that's not in my job description, but that's what we do. I mean, that's what we do. We're surrogate parents that are trying to make sure your kid has the best experience, learns the most, and and becomes capable in terms of dealing with the world, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing I stress all the time. Like, why are we so against teachers? Your child is with that person
Right.
for the majority of the day. Right.
Correct.
And that's the person, your child. I mean, listen, I would never be where I was today if it weren't for the great teachers in my life. That's just, but teachers, especially in the state of Florida, aren't doing it for the pay, right? We're what, 48th out of 50 lowest paid states. And it doesn't seem to be, even with the little bonus that was, thrown your way, it doesn't add up at the end of the year.
Even the bonus is coming from the taxpayers, though. It's through
Correct.
referendums through taxpayers.
Correct.
Myself, I can speak to myself and almost all my friends at Stoneman Douglas. We teach extra classes so we make more money. I teach Saturdays driver's education so I make more money so I can provide for my family. I mean, it's like, would I like to not go to work on Saturdays? Of course. But I have to go to work on Saturdays because I want my kids to be able to dance. I want my daughter to be able to do this. I want to be able to help get my kid a car, whatever it might be. So it's, again, everybody always says like, oh, you're off for the whole summer. But I worked 2 jobs this summer.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, it's like maybe you're
and listen, after dealing with kids all day, you deserve the whole summer off. You can't take it off, right? Because I was in my son's first grade class the other day and I kept looking at his teacher. I'm like, I don't know how you do this. I could not be a teacher. I'm like, I don't know how you do this all day long with 22 6 and 7 year olds. So I know high school is probably a little different because you've got a different interaction with kids, but they're still kids. They're still kids.
But again, you're talking about her, you're talking about me. I'm sure she loves her job as much as I love my job.
She loves it. Yeah. She loves it.
So take that into account before you start, vilifying us.
Right. Right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I'm going to link your book when we publish this, and we look forward to the next book. If you write another book, I hope you come back on.
I will.
All right. Say hi to Lauren for me.
I will. Great meeting you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend wherever you get your podcasts and tell a friend. You can also follow the podcast on our social media pages.